These guys were the original storm warriors.
Men who saved lives on the ocean. Members of the U.S. Life-Saving Service, a predecessor to the modern-day Coast Guard.
The idea was to hire locals who knew the water and knew the environment. At that time, it didn't matter whether you were Chinese or black or white. If you were local and knew the waters and were a boatman, then you were a good candidate for the life-saving service.
Built in 1878, the Pea Island Life-Saving Station became one of many that dotted the Outer Banks with a mission of land-based ocean rescues.
This is a very tempestuous place, and a lot of shipwrecks happen here because of the location of the barrier islands, the continental shelf, and the way we stick way out in the middle of the ocean.
A high loss of life and property off the North Carolina coast plagued that life-saving station, and it prompted a very bold move.
What happened next was just unheard of in American history. One of the black surfmen was hired to be the keeper of the station. And that was just unheard of.
It happened in 1880. Richard Etheridge, a freed slave who'd fought in the Civil War, became the first African-American station keeper in the life-saving service.
Highly unusual to put a black man in charge of a life-saving station. Usually if you were African-American, you had kind of a lowly job, or you were a surfman, but you weren't at the top of the heap.
Several of the existing crew were fired. The station's white crew, they quit, refusing to work for an African-American man. A disgruntled surfman even burned the station to the ground. With the pressure now of no crew and no station, Etheridge did the only thing he could do. He hired an all-African-American crew and rebuilt that station, a crew he knew would be under scrutiny.
The good thing about that, what came out of that was good, was that because they knew what their position was, they knew they were going to have to work harder than anybody else to kind of prove to the rest of the world. And in fact, they did just exactly that.
So this was an opportunity, an experiment to say, hey, if given the chance, given the proper training, we can perform just like anyone else.
October 11th, 1896, a hurricane pounded the coast, causing the highest tides in more than 50 years. Beach patrols were suspended, but surfman Theodore Meekins was on duty as lookout from the station's tower.
They saw a glimmer of light, and they didn't want to pass on it. They sent up a Coston flare to see if they would get a signal back, to see if there's a ship in distress out there, and they did.
That glimmer was the E.S. Newman, a 300-ton, three-masted schooner in trouble. On board, Captain Sylvester Gardner, 6 crew members, his wife, and his daughter. Captain Gardner had a choice: ride out the storm and risk sinking, or run aground. He chose the latter and crashed into shoals about 2 miles south of the Pea Island station. Etheridge and his men took action.
So they were out of options. And the keeper, Richard Etheridge, said, fellas, the book doesn't cover this. We can hear people out there. That's our job. This is what we need to do, and I have an idea.
He tied a rope around 2 surfmen at a time, and they swam out to the Newman.
Swimming through hurricane seas with a ship that's likely to come apart. So you're swimming through the waves and debris.
They got all 9 off. Each surfman had gone out. Meekins went out all 9 times, and they saved the entire crew. Captain Gardner went out to survey the damage. There was nothing left. There was just bits and pieces of wood strewn all over the beach, except that there was one board that was complete, and it was the nameplate of his ship, the E.S. Newman.
And the rescue of the Newman proved to the nation African Americans had an important place in the life-saving service, leaving behind quite a legacy.
Pea Island, it's just one of those points in history that shines like a beacon.